Good afternoon and welcome to our webinar today, Surviving Tough Times Starts in the Boardroom. I'm Emily McCormick. I'm the Vice President of Editorial and Research at Bank Director. I oversee our research initiatives and content for our Bank Services program, as well as contributing for Bank Director Magazine and bankdirector.com. While recent bank failures shined a light on liquidity risks, the rising interest rate environment promises to affect both sides of the balance sheet. But it also raised more awareness about the board's oversight responsibility. Today's webinar will draw inspiration from Bank Director's 2023 Governance Best Practices Survey, which we released just last week. You'll find that report in the research section at bankdirector.com. In that research and through today's conversation, we're going to explore aspects of the governance process, board composition and culture, and how boards can respond to today's risks. So we brought together two seasoned bank board members to help us do just that. We're going to introduce them in just a few minutes, but I do want to go over a few housekeeping items first. First off, don't worry, we can't hear you. You are in listen-only mode for this webinar. We do recommend that you click on the slide button at the bottom of the screen. That's going to put the presenters into full screen mode. We strongly encourage you to ask questions during this conversation. So we would love to hear from you. If you have any questions, just note those by clicking the Q&A button. You're going to find that on the right-hand side of your screen. And we're going to make sure there's some time toward the end of our conversation to address any of the questions that have been submitted. Now, if you have any technical issues, we want to help you take care of those too. So just note those using the moderator chat feature. That is also on the right-hand side of your screen, very close to that Q&A button. You don't have to worry about taking notes. We're going to share this presentation with all attendees within 24 hours via email. It will also be available on bankdirector.com. And finally, the opinions expressed in this webinar are those of the individual speakers only. They do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the other speakers or of the entities with which the speakers are associated. So with all that addressed, really thrilled to introduce our panel today. Dr. Glenda Baskin-Glover is the lead director at Pinnacle Financial Partners. That's based near me in Nashville, Tennessee. She has served as president of Tennessee State University for the past decade. Dr. Glover is also a certified public accountant and an attorney, which makes her a natural fit for Pinnacle's risk and nominating governance committees. And Noel Holland is the board chair at Columbia Financial. That's a New Jersey community bank. At one time or another, Noel tells me he has served on or chaired all of the board's committees, including audit. He currently chairs the board's risk committee. And until his retirement, he practiced law at Anderson and Holland, specializing in land use and transactional law. So welcome, Dr. Glover. Welcome, Noel.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, Emily.
Well, I'm
nice
so
to meet
excited.
you, Dr. Glover.
Well, I'm so excited because we've really got a wealth of experience here today. And I do want to remind our audience again, please don't hesitate to ask those questions. I think we're going to have a great conversation, but we will make some time at the end so you can be part of that. So do want to start off by getting to know each of you a little bit, letting you share a little bit about yourselves, but also about your banks. We've got attendees from across the country here at this webinar today. You're both representing different geographies. So I hope you could each take a minute and tell us about the institutions where you're serving on the board. So Glenda, can you kick us off?
Thank you, and good afternoon to everyone. I serve on the board of Pinnacle Financial Partners, which is a parent company of Pinnacle Bank. It's located in Nashville. It's a Pinnacle Financial Partners is a holding company with approximately 42 billion in assets as of the end of last fiscal year in December. We have about 17 primary urban markets, far more cities than that, but those are the urban markets. Pinnacle is a community bank and provides a lot of personalized services to the clients, but yet provides a full range of banking and investment services, trusts and mortgages and insurance products, and all the services designed for businesses and individuals interested in a comprehensive relationship with their bank, their financial institution.
Very well known in the Nashville area for sure. Noel, can you tell us a bit about your institution?
Sure. All right. Good afternoon. I'm an independent director and chairman of the board of Columbia Financial Inc., which is the holding company for Columbia Bank. We trade on the NASDAQ as CLBK. We were a mutual bank until 2018, founded in 1927. In 2018, we did a minority stock offering. We're presently approximately 10 billion in size, 60 branches, 10 counties in New Jersey. Since the minority offering, right, we've done 4 acquisitions. We actually continue our growth in an organic manner, right? We're actually still opening branches. And I'm sitting about 20 minutes from the George Washington Bridge, right? So we're an immediate suburb of New York City.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, before we kind of dive into, we want to kind of find out what you're seeing in your boardrooms and how you're addressing some boardroom challenges. But I did want to get a sense, because you're both long-term bank board members, and that's a big commitment, and it's a challenge. It's an individual challenge. So I want to hear from each of you, why serve on a bank board? What draws you to that service? We can start with Noel.
Oh, sure. Okay, it's something that when I've been on the board for many years, right? When I started, or as I indicated, Columbia was a mutual bank, right? It's truly a community bank. I had a small law practice, and the communities we were in, all right, were communities that Columbia was in. And it really started out as a matter of community service. It was something that I felt it was very important that bank be successful, all right, for the benefit of our community and for the benefit of our customers. And they were somewhat coincident, right, with the clients we had in our law firm. Now, as a partially public bank, we've added the role, all right, that it's important we build shareholder value. And that's something that we've certainly been working on very carefully in the last several years.
All right, Glenda?
And I am honored to serve on the board of directors for Pinnacle Bank because of what Pinnacle represents in the Nashville community, Tennessee community, and the other markets in which we're located. Since the board of directors of the bank is responsible for setting the strategic direction of the institution, it really draws me in even further because my background is finance and accounting and economics. It was a natural fit. It's my way of giving back, and it's another way of strengthening the leadership skills because community bank that serves the community, I'm in the community. I grew up in a civil rights home that served the community. And so I'm really excited still, after being on the board over 10 years, I'm still excited to go to every board meeting to discuss how we can be of more service to the community and then just get more value to the shareholders.
Yeah. Well, that says a lot to have that excitement, a decade of service and still have that enthusiasm, which makes you both a great fit for this webinar today. And I wanted to start off with a question that kind of gets to the heart of that from a board perspective, rather than an individual perspective. I mean, a big part of the reason we do our annual governance best practices survey is looking at what makes a strong board. What do you put that all together? What makes a good, strong board that can effectively oversee its institution? So I'm curious what you see, what you see in terms of the components of a strong board. We're going to dig into culture and composition, but I want to hear from you kind of at the set of this. I'm not sure who wants to take that question first.
I think we're taking turns going first, and maybe my turn now. A strong board. The boards must have competent and committed members who understand the business of banking. So, and the great boards have to be frank and open and respectful in the conversations as they work again to build a shareholder wealth. And so the members must be engaged and informed, must read the materials and understand the materials, and if not, ask questions about the materials that you receive in advance. But importantly, we must understand the role and responsibilities. We're directors. We are members of the board of directors, not members of the executive team. We're not responsible for the day-to-day running of the bank. We set the direction, set the policy. That's what makes a strong board, to understand your role, to lead, not to manage, but to inspire others, and have these meaningful conversations and provide strategic support, and to just continue to commit to the ongoing learning and development of the members and of the organization itself. And one thing is important, to get the right information at the board meetings, the information you'll need to make the right decisions. The senior management team worked really hard at putting together robust information, a board book to put the framework together. And so working as that team, that shared purpose is what makes a good board member.
Well, I think Dr. Glover said it very well, right? It's something that, I guess, kind of echoing some of the ideas that she set forth. When I'm thinking of a strong board, right, I'm thinking of a board, right, that is truly committed to, right, the goals of the institution. Right? It's something that here at Columbia Bank, right, we're a community bank, right, and it's something that we're looking to accomplish things that are good for all the communities that we're involved in, be part of those communities, and support people and the businesses in those communities. So that we're certainly looking for that in each board member as being kind of a primary thought on their behalf, or the primary goal. Certainly also, when we're looking for board members, right, we're looking for those that have the highest ethical standards. It's something that, I'm a firm believer of tone from the top, right? So if we're not doing it right at the board, we're not going to find management doing it right. So it's something that, it's extremely important to me that we find that. I think at Columbia, we've also found, if I went back 10, 15 years ago, every board member looked just like me. And it's something that, we've, I believe, done a good job of accomplishing diversity in the boardroom. So it's something that, both from a gender standpoint, race and ethnicity, but also from a professional background and understanding of business. So it's something that we've got a nice blend of people, all right? And I think that brings to the table, all right, a lot of different views, right, that can respectfully discuss issues and arrive at conclusions.
Yeah, I think I think there's a couple of things I want to pull from there, but let's go with composition since we're kind of touching on that, both in terms of skills and experiences, but mentioning ethics too, and just some of the ongoing things and attributes that we want to see in a board member. And we do dedicate a lot of attention in our survey research this year, but as well as past years, about looking at board composition and getting those points of view. But that requires identifying those folks. That requires, finding folks, getting them into the boardroom, making sure they're a good fit for the boardroom. That's, not an easy process. It's something that maybe very much has to be intentional. So I wonder how each of you are thinking about cultivating new prospective board members, identifying those, how you're spending time on that, how you're making that happen.
Well, I can probably start on that. And I guess the easiest way for me to approach it is to talk a little bit about sources we've found, all right, for board members in the past, all right. So that, again, if you went back years ago, all right, it was really probably personal acquaintances of other directors, all right, that wound up on the board. But that's certainly not the case today, right? It's something that it's a much broader situation. When we're looking for a new director, right, we're first doing a skill set assessment to see what type of skills we need at the board level, and then going out, all right, to try to find that individual. And at our own institution, all right, we've been successful in individuals that have acted as advisors to the board in a professional way, all right, in one or two cases, all right, they've been successful candidates for board positions. our management being active in the various organizations, including the Chamber of Commerce, right, has yielded another individual. So it's something that's come from a lot of different, avenues. But each time we're in a situation of needing a board member, right, it's kind of a new challenge, right, as to how we're going to approach it.
Hmm.
And I totally agree. We did talk about the fact that we're community banks, and the board composition of a community bank might be a little unique because we seek members of the community we serve. Regional banks, community banks, both unique in that respect, and how we select members from the community for the most part. The others who are not in the immediate community, but that's largely it. And then you look at the skill set in addition to that, not in order. You look at the skill set to make sure you have the individual with the skill set that we're seeking. If it's somebody in finance, if it's someone in cybersecurity that we need, if it's somebody in IT that we need, if it's somebody we need in law. So we look to see the type of skill set that the board is missing. And we seek for that person. But in a larger, as part of a larger conversation, does the board represent the community? And do we have the right number of people? Do we have the right people of the community we're serving? We look at that, and it's the person that we're considering, that person overboarded. Does that person on too many boards to devote the time that's required to be an effective board member? So we just have our finger on the pulse of the community and keep our eyes open, ears open, take referrals. If someone looks up and says, this person would be a good addition to the Pinnacle board. Well, if we're trying to, if we're at the point where we're seeking new board members, then we will, but we're not, then that person will be considered at a later date. But we're always watching to see if we have the right skill set to serve the community and the states in which we operate.
Glenda, I'm thinking about, Pinnacle's very familiar to me. We're in the same national area here, but thinking about Pinnacle's growth path over, I don't know, the past number of years, there's a lot. You mentioned you're in those different southeastern metro areas. It's a pretty expansive, geography and metro focus. How important is geography at this point in the bank's growth journey?
Well, it is important in our growth because, as you probably, if you know about Pinnacle, we've grown through a combination of acquisitions as well as organic growth. We're now in office in Tennessee, and we've got some office in North Carolina through a purchase, through an acquisition there, then in South Carolina and Virginia, and now we're in Georgia and Alabama. And so we want to represent those communities and other communities because shareholders can be anywhere internationally. So we'll talk about building shareholder wealth. But the key is to make sure you have the right type of individuals who can advance the mission of the institution.
Mm-hmm. Well, another thing.
So right now, I'm sorry, go.
Go ahead.
I was just going to add to it, as far as Columbia is concerned, right? We don't have as interesting a story as Dr. Glover presents, right? As far as multiple state involvement, all right? We're just in New Jersey, all right?
Yeah.
We do have a lending office in Pennsylvania, all right? But we have 60 branches throughout New Jersey, and we're doing our expansion, all right, within the state, all right, to different communities. And within New Jersey, we have a tremendous variety of different types of communities, right, that are there to be served, basically. So right within the state, we find our own challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. We love the diversity of the banking system, and that's why I think it's interesting. We've got two different geographies and two different size banks represented here today. I did want to bring up, I guess, board churn. That was something we talked about in the survey because you want to balance having the viewpoints of experienced directors, long-term directors, but also you mentioned maybe we need new skills for the strategy going forward. How do we bring those folks in? How do we get a fresh perspective? Do either of you believe that there is an appropriate level of balance there that are you trying to be aware of seeking it? Just curious how you kind of approach this question.
So I always try to balance the institutional memory and expertise with some fresh ideas and fresh perspectives. So we want to make sure you have that good mix there. I'm not so sure if it's the age or the churn is just your natural cycle. So we want to make sure we just continue to have good board members who care about the institution, who will put forth the time and energy and effort needed to advance the mission and do the things that are representative of the bank that we have put together. And so we have to make sure we have the right balance. And I don't think any bank is perfect with that, but we're just striving to be perfect with it. We're striving to improve where we are with our churn and make sure that, I think some have age limits, some don't, but just we have a good mix there to get the job done.
So at Columbia, we do have an age limit. It's actually probably a higher age than many institutions. It's 76 is a mandatory retirement age. We talk about but haven't done anything as far as term limits are concerned. Historically, right, we've had directors that have served for long periods of time, and I don't know. From our standpoint, right, it's something that as a result of having different age individuals on the board, we do have changes periodically as far as our directors, so fresh ideas coming to the table. But we're also preserving a lot of the knowledge that some of our directors that are long tenured. So it's something that I think we try to get that right balance, right? It's an interesting thing, though, right? I suppose term limits are probably something that are going to come down the pike as best practice someday, but we haven't gone there yet.
Yeah, I mean, no, I'm glad you bring that up, and I want to ask Dr. Glover in a minute. So, but we have already received some questions, and I know I said I'd hold them to the end, but these are so timely with what we're talking about right now. So Noel mentioned term limits, having a mandatory retirement age. Glenda, I would love to hear that from you as well, because that is one of the questions from our audience is term limits. They also want to know how big each of your boards are. So we'll get back to Noel, but Glenda, if you could.
I wouldn't call it term. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I wouldn't necessarily call it term limits, but there is an age requirement. I believe it's 75. It may be 76, but there is an age requirement. But, as I suspect, not just as this pinnacle, but I suspect as people live longer, we're in a generation now that the age projection by the statisticians is that they're living longer. So I can see boards having a different age than they have today. I can see 5 years from now that age changing because we're living longer and taking better care of ourselves many times. So, but right now, yes, there is an age requirement.
And do either of you have exceptions with that mandatory retirement age? I know sometimes I'll hear about that with skills or things of that nature. Okay.
I don't think so. I don't know of a case where we have made an exception.
Okay.
We typically don't have any exception to the age limit. We did have one circumstance, right? There was an event going on, right, that we extended a term for 1 year just because we didn't want the retirement in the middle of the event, basically. Something we try to stick to that retirement age as a firm situation.
You need those fresh ideas. You need this idea of freshness. You bring on. I mean, even in my personal life here at Tennessee State University as president, you want to look at individuals who bring a different perspective to the table. I think that helps in carrying out the mission.
Yeah. Well, along those lines, in thinking about composition and earlier at our start, I think both of you alluded to engagement. And one of the tools that we see used or to drive engagement, to drive accountability is performance assessments or peer assessments. I'm curious if that's a practice for either of you, and if so, how you ensure that that's an effective process.
So I think maybe it's my turn to go first, right? So it's something that we do, annual self-assessments of the board, something that the company to do it. Right, we assess the board performance and the board procedures. We also do a separate evaluation of each of the committees, right, with the committee members including those assessments. We do not at Columbia do an actual peer evaluation. In other words, peer-to-peer evaluation. It's instead a self-assessment of the entire group working together.
Similarly, at Pinnacle, well, first of all, directors should engage and participate and come to meetings prepared. But some companies do ask board members just review individually each board member, their peer assessment. Pinnacle does not do that either. So we're in the board meeting, so you see who's contributing and who's not. We do a committee assessment of all the committees, including the executive committee. There's an assessment done. And the information is reported back to the board as a whole. I mean, I chair the nominating committee, nominating corporate governance. There's my committee that's responsible for performing the assessment, overseeing the assessments. So we have a discussion, anything we need to incorporate into it. For example, I think it was one time we asked to see more, hear more from the senior management. And so that was just changed. That adjustment was made, and we hear from senior management. I mean, interact more with them, not so much see more, but interact more with them. And I think that was a good change, and you enjoy talking to the head of accounting and the head of audit. It's a good thing because I get some kind of anal when it comes to numbers anyway. So
it's good to be that way when you're on a bank board. So that's a good attribute for sure. I wanted to ask you each quickly because Glenda, you alluded to this a little bit in terms of the role of the board, and I think it might be important to pause here. We actually did get a question in from our audience about this in terms of summarizing the roles and responsibilities of the board. We could probably spend a whole webinar on its own about the roles and responsibilities of the board, but just thinking about, we were just talking about how do you bring in prospective new board members. So if you had a prospective new board member, how do you kind of define the role of the director? Because that's a big part of making sure an assessment's effective. Everybody needs to know where they're coming from. Glenda, you want to start with that one?
I'll start with that.
Okay.
The role of the board member, first you're part of a team that creates the direction and the strategy for the company, the strategic direction for the company. We work a lot through the committees, the audit committee, the compensation committee, the community affairs, risk, nominating corporate governance, and other committees of the board. And I'm impressed that Noah said he served on every committee. I haven't served on quite every committee. I've been on quite a few of them. But you have to understand the various duties of board members. The duty of care first requires you to practice due diligence before acting. You have to have your due diligence. It's the negligence concept. You have to keep the company information private. You have a fiduciary duty, is a word. The fiduciary duty, the required director to make decisions that pursue the company's interests with reasonable diligence and prudence. You have to do them loyalty. Now, the Lord and I both can talk about this. We're both lawyers. So, it's fiduciary duty. It's owned by director. It involves disclosing or avoiding any conflicts of interest. You want to place the interests of the company and the shareholders before anybody's personal interest. If you hear information about the company that may cause the stock price to decline potentially, you can't go in and sell your shares before the information is made public. You have to have that duty of loyalty, and then there's another duty of obedience. So those types of duties you must have to be a good board member. And then just to make sure you understand your role is not to manage the company, not to go down. Like we can't go down to Noel. I can't go down to the legal department and take over, because that's not what we do. We set the direction of policy and let them do their jobs and hold them accountable.
So certainly, Dr. Glover covered, I think, just in an excellent way, all right, what you're looking at, all right, board responsibility is concerned. Actually, kind of go back to something she said at the beginning, and that's that we're not there to actually run the company basically and do the day-to-day operation. And it's something that with new directors, my experience is I've onboarded, I guess, five directors. And it's something that with each of them, right, the challenge is kind of getting that concept of oversight to them and have them embrace that and understand the difference between providing oversight versus, right, actually making the day-to-day business type decisions, right, to stay in that oversight role and that strategic role as opposed to getting down into worrying about whether we're locking the branch at night or whether we're doing the day-to-day functions.
Yeah. Well, this is probably as good a time of any when we're talking about oversight. I do want to address risk oversight specifically. This is something we really addressed in our survey and has really been top of mind. It should always be top of mind in a bank board, but certainly recent events have maybe shined a new light on how important that role is. And I want to pose a question that actually our editor at large, Jack Milligan, posed in our latest issue of Bank Director magazine. He asked the question, can bank directors really govern risk? So I'd appreciate your thoughts on that, because I think that really gets to how do boards make sure they're really getting a handle on risk when you're not managing the bank, but you are tasked with that oversight responsibility.
So
I don't know who
I
wants
guess I'll want me to go first, or
Okay, no.
I think what we have to accept is that we're actually in a risk business. So it's something that we have to find a way, right, to address and to mitigate risk, right? It's just as easy as that, right? Because it is everything we do, kind of, right, is in one way or another an assessment of the risk and the potential outcomes, right, that come from that. So it's something that at Columbia, right, it's something that we actually have the board sit as the risk committee, right, on 4 times a year. We don't actually have a risk committee composed of just individual members or a limited number of board members. The entire board sits as that risk committee and assesses our risk and works with management to develop our risk appetite on a quarterly basis. And it's worked out fairly well for us. But I think that's managing risk is probably the biggest challenge, right, for board members. But it isn't something that we can avoid because it's a risk business.
And we do it just a little differently than at Pinnacle. We do have a risk committee, and it's chaired by a CPA. I say that because in some cases the audit committee is probably doing a lot of work that risk committees would do. But certain size banks have to have risk committees, and others do not. And so we do have a risk committee, and how we mitigate as much risk as possible. We meet with our regulators and speak with regulators regularly and review the regulatory reports, have discussions on them. We go into executive session. In executive session, we go around the room, we talk through some of the issues that may have been raised. We meet with the key individuals in management, the chief risk officer, the enterprise-wide risk manager, the cybersecurity, how much cybersecurity protection. And we bring up the questions. We meet with the compliance people and read through the reports. We report from the BSA team. So we have, there are ways to eliminate as much risk as possible by just staying on top of it, meeting with the right persons, reading their reports and understanding their reports and asking questions if something comes up that you think you may want more detail on, some further detail on. So, but managing risk, I mean, we're in the business by definition. It's risky. And so we want to stay on top of the risk.
Yeah. I'm curious, something I've been interested in around the process of stress testing, which, is we're not talking about necessarily the CCAR, big bank, Dodd-Frank stress test, but every bank is doing some sort of exercise to understand impacts of various things like interest rates and things of that nature. And one of the criticisms in March with the bank failures that we saw was that maybe stress testing wasn't stressful enough. Maybe boards and management teams needed to think more creatively about what's actually the worst that could happen or near the worst and things of that nature. I'm curious if either of you have thoughts on encouraging kind of that level of creativity, maybe strategic creativity may be a good way to put it, in the boardroom, in deliberations, or in risk committee discussions.
At Columbia, all right, the stress testing is something that we've always taken very seriously. I have to say, all right, until the recent bank turmoil that we've gone through, some of the what I thought were extreme stress issues, right, that I didn't think were actually going to occur, have actually occurred, right? So it's something not for us, right, but for other institutions. So I think what we're trying to do at the bank is to understand whether we are using stress testing to cover all circumstances that are necessary. Something that we're certainly expanding, right? Some of the areas, right, as far as stress testing is concerned, beyond what the regulators want, right? There are specific things the regulators walk in and are looking for specific stress tests, right? That's something that at Columbia we're trying, particularly after the last 3 months, to look at other things that we need to stress test and understand. Just the social media difficulty that developed in this bank turmoil situation is something that we're trying to learn to assess that and try to stress test it, right, to understand, right, what that all means, right? The speed with which everything happened during the bank turmoil certainly is something that I think we've learned from, right, and we're stronger as a result, right? But it's something that while we were prepared for a lot, I don't know if we were completely prepared for what we saw nationally. But fortunately for ourselves, right, it didn't affect us directly.
Well, I agree that we have to continue to stress test because it has to be done regularly. I think we're to be just have more discussions about the stress testing and just talk about what we need to do as a board to ensure that we're adequate. Our stress test is adequate, and we've covered the basis what we need to cover. I was going to go another direction about the asset liability management, but that's not quite what you were asking.
Well, I want to ask about that. So maybe this is great timing there. And Linda, we're going to start with you because I'm curious how those conversations, no one mentioned the movement of money, how those conversations in the boardroom about asset liability management might have shifted.
Well, it is shifting. Let me start by saying, people generally think that a bank can only go under by not making good loans. That's not necessarily true. I guess Silicon Valley is an example of not paying attention to the stress test and pay attention to the management of the assets and the management of liabilities, because we have an asset liability committee that regularly reports to the board. You have to manage that risk, manage that asset liability risk, because if the ratios move one way, then the assets may reprice more quickly. The liabilities move another way. So we have to watch that asset liability management to see which way, how quickly you need to reprice assets.
Yeah. No, anything to add to that?
Well, I guess what I'd add is, while we have always given, I think, adequate attention to the asset liability issue, something the bank turmoil that we saw has heightened our awareness of the issues. we've certainly encouraged management to kind of do a deep dive on the investment portfolio and all of our other investments to completely understand our risk situations as far as they're concerned. Again, I think that's probably an area that we may come out of this recent episode, right, as stronger banks, right, because it's something that we're more attuned to some of these issues.
Well, I want to give some time for our Q&A because we have been getting some questions in. As a reminder to our audience, if you do have any questions, we are going to make some time at the end. We've been getting some. We will try to address all that we can here toward the end. But I did have a final question that I wanted to touch on, something that came across when I was talking with you both in advance of this webinar, is how each of you kind of touch on environmental, social, and governance issues, or ESG, which has been in the conversation as well, a little controversial, but something that companies, that banks have had to deal with, particularly publicly traded institutions like Pinnacle. And Glenda, you told me that you guys in the boardroom at Pinnacle have a committee focused on ESG. So I hoped maybe you could tell us a little bit about that.
Well, overall, I think the boards have to have clear strategies, a clear governance strategies, and a framework. And so we take it from a leadership position. And those considerations, lately we've had some real familiar corporate concerns like climate change and gender equality, workforce diversity, and so at Pinnacle. Sorry, at Pinnacle, we have a climate committee. As you know, the SEC, Securities Exchange Commission, has proposed rules that will trigger climate disclosure, and so that's something that we're all keeping an eye on. And then the social issues, diversity. This is really important because no matter what side of the aisle you may represent, efforts are being dismantling across the country. Their efforts to dismantle DEI is just growing across the country, and boards have to be resolute in their commitment, to race and gender and ethnicity and culture, even geographic in some cases. And it's those perspectives that are brought to the table. So as we're eliminating on a wholesale level diversity around the country, boards have to make sure that they're diverse and inclusive. But we can be diverse and not be inclusive. We all know that. And that you have the equity that's there so that everyone has the same access to and opportunities, despite any barriers, despite the other advantages or disadvantages. And so everybody should start from the same place, regardless of who they are or where they're coming from. So that DEI commitment is really, really important as we live in this new world that's being created.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's not the Pinnacle policy statement. That's just being a university president and keeping abreast of affirmative action and things that are going on in the world.
Yeah.
I have to give that as my own opinion.
Yeah, I mean that's fair. But when you talk about that, Glenda, in terms of focusing on DEI in the boardroom, I know we talk about building more diverse boards, but are you looking at Pinnacle's goals around DEI and things of that nature, or is that also elevating to the boardroom?
It is, and we have 3 out of our 15. But I'm saying we're getting there. We're not where we want to be right now, but we're getting there. And as long as we are aware of where we're headed and know that there's something that there's a goal we're trying to accomplish, it makes for a better board. And that we do have those discussions. We do have retreats where we talk about DEI and we talk about where we want to be when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion. And I know when a question is asked, how's it going to affect us? What's happening in the larger world? And our answer is Pinnacle's going to continue its DEI policies and make sure that it remains the institution we are today. We don't have to conform to what others are, the other conversations that may or may not be positive. And so that's where we are with where we are with diversity, equity, inclusion.
Okay. And Noel, when we spoke earlier, you have a really interesting executive position over at Columbia, an executive vice president of governance and culture. I would imagine that blends in with whatever Columbia is doing around ESG. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about this?
Sure. So it's something that ESG at Columbia is we don't have a separate committee at the board level for it. Right, management has a separate ESG committee itself. The board does not have a separate committee for ESG. By charter, nominating and governance actually handles the ESG issue. Right, the diversity, equity, and inclusion is actually handled at our human capital committee. Kind of as an outflow of working with this ESG for the last several years, we've particularly found it, particularly the social and governance aspect of it, right? I think we're quite far along in trying to address it correctly, and the outgrowth of that was to actually name an individual as an executive vice president in charge of governance and culture. Right? It's something that that's the individual that's entrusted with many responsibilities, but one of them is ESG. As I say, we're pretty well developed as far as the social and governance aspect of it. The environmental aspect of it, we're committed to, but I don't know that we completely understand where we have to wind up. Let's put it that way. So that we're a work in progress as far as the environmental issues concerned, and we're obviously watching to see what the regulators are going to actually be looking for as far as this is concerned. We're committed to the subject, but environmental is a little bit something that we're trying to quite figure out how we address that appropriately. Yeah. The position for I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just going to add, because we've had fairly rapid growth here, and it's important to us, that we stick to our roots of being a community bank and being committed to our employees. With the growth and with the natural changes that happen as far as employees coming and going, we also chose to incorporate in this position of the governance, the concept of culture. And this individual is really entrusted with looking at our creative shared values and making certain, that we stick to it, and that our decisions, when we're making a decision, that it matches with that, so that we don't get too far away from the center point we want to be on as far as being a community bank. When you're bringing in we've had quite a few new executives come into the company, to provide the talent and support that we need, and some come from smaller banks, some come from very large banks, and to kind of orient them to our culture and accomplish our goals, Having this person, that's their job is culture and governance, It's something that's really helped, I think.
All right. Well, we have received some questions over the course of our conversation. We addressed a few of them at the top, but I do we've got a few minutes and try to go through them. If you're out there in the audience and you do have a question, we've still got a few minutes, and so go ahead and submit it. We'll try to get to it if we can. The first question is actually specifically for Noel. You mentioned at the top converting from a mutual to a stock bank. It said your board's accountability, when you did that, direct accountability shifted from largely local depositors to investors interested in return. How do you maintain a community-first focus in a time of shrinking margins?
Well, that's a great question. That really is, and it's something that I'm not sure we have all the answers as far as it's concerned, but it's something that we're working at it, It's something that while like many banks, right, we are affected, right, by a lot that's gone on in the last several months as far as the banking world and the economy. Um, but and we've had to look at our expenses in certain areas, right? But where we have not cut back, right, is monies that are devoted to community activities and involvement as far as the community is concerned. The two things that kind of run independent of our budgets and everything else here is we have one, a concept of Team Columbia, right, where all of our employees are encouraged to do volunteer activities. They're allowed at least a minimum of one, if not more, days during the work week, right, throughout the year, to go out and do volunteer activities, both in a team concept, right, where there's a whole group of Columbia employees there, and in an individual concept with some of the charities that we're involved with. The other thing we have at Columbia that's allowed us to keep this community focus is when we did the minority stock offering. One of the most important parts of it, right, is we actually created a foundation, right, and that foundation, right, operates essentially independent from the bank, right, has a own director, has its own board, and it actually is making significant contributions to the communities that we're in, despite ups and downs of the economy or budget cuts or things such as that. It doesn't affect that at all.
All right. Another question we got in, which I really gets back to our discussion about composition, but I love this question. It's basically, and this is for either of you, whoever wants to jump in on it. How does one best throw their hat into the ring to signal their interest to a bank that they want to be on the board? How do you make that connection to kind of put your hand up and say, I'm interested in serving on a bank board?
Well,
Linda, you want to take that first, or?
Oh, well, that's a very good question because we get that question often. Just say the real question is how do you get on a board, period, and then how do you get on a bank board? Because it's different. You can't apply. It's not an application process. You have to be invited to be on a board. That's the biggest concept we have to get over to individuals who want to be on boards. It's just you have to just let people know that you're interested. You can get to the chairman of the board, of the bank board. You can get to someone on the board and speak to them and let them know. I mean, what doesn't really work is just sending a resume, just going through going through the getting an address and sending it to the person. That doesn't work as well because they want to. Again, it's an invitation to be on the board, and so you want to be in a space where board members are and let them see you in action. Let them see you deliver a paper. Let them see you do a speech somewhere, so they can see that you have a talent and a skill set. If your background is accounting, do something in accounting. Do an article. Make sure you're out there. You can make yourself known so that the board members are part of this community. They can see what you're doing and ask you to become a part of the board. And that's how to get in the bank board in the community. But how to get on a board overall is to just really start dedicating yourself to how can I find out the right way to approach the people. You get annual reports, look at proxy statements, see who doesn't have a woman, who doesn't have a minority, a person of color on there. Say, maybe this is a chance for me here. And then see if you can get a way to see the chairman of the board somewhere. Not to call up his office and say, may I meet with you? But if if he has an interest in golf, then maybe there's a golf tournament he'll be there to see that him or her. Or somewhere where you can have a conversation with the board chair or a board member, or talk to one of the search firms. But do know that when search firms are hired to get a board member, they're hired by the board and not from you. So they're not looking necessarily at you from that standpoint. They're looking to help the bank or the other board in finding a board member. But the way is just be visible. Be as visible as you possibly can and do great things in the community so you can be seen by the board members.
I think Dr. Glover said it very well, and I like the the last remarks you made the best, right? And that's the, being of service to your community and outstanding in your community. I think what actually brings you to mind, right, when a board's looking for potential candidates.
Yeah. Now, something else that also came up in the Q&A was whether either of you use advisory boards as a way to identify board members, or do either of you have advisory boards at your institutions?
I can take that first, right? We do have a business advisory council. It has probably 20 to 30 people on it. It's something that it is a potential resource, right, for having the opportunity to see individuals kind of in action, right, as to whether they might be a potential candidate for the board. To be very honest, right, we have not actually retained a board member from that business council to date, though, right? It hasn't actually panned out that particular.
Well, no, at Pinnacle, we don't have an advisory board, but we are really in the community a lot, and it's easy to feel who we are, and to just talk to board members and let your interest be known, because you never know when an opening may come up. And so just let everybody know that you're interested in being on the board or a board.
Mm-hmm. Well, probably the last question we can address this morning, or this afternoon, sorry, is efficiencies, because that is a challenge for banks right now. And this audience member is curious, maybe are your boards working to drive efficiencies? I think this kind of gets at the tension of management versus board, but how that's being addressed in the boardroom.
I can go, I guess, first as far as it's concerned. Efficiency is something that as a board, right, we look at, right, on a monthly basis, right? We are trying to improve our efficiency, going from the world of being a mutual, right, to situation of having a minority stock offering and shareholders certainly requires us to focus on that and try to better achieve it. I don't know that we found all the answers as far as it's concerned, but it's a work in progress for us.
And we all strive to improve efficiency. And the best way I think to do is review the committee reports. And it takes time to go through all the reports. I try to go through at least once, sometimes more than once. If I have a long flight, take and read on the plane and highlight it with my yellow marker. But that, I think when you look at the reports, you can, a light bulb may go off and say, why did we do this? Or here's a good way we're doing it. Let me congratulate this person for doing it this way. So we just want to make sure that it's all about accountability, holding the persons accountable for what they have or have not done correctly or efficiently.
Well, that really gets to engagement as a board and the role of a director. Well, with that, we're out of questions and we're basically out of time. So I want to thank Noel, Dr. Glover. Thank you so much for joining me today. This was a fascinating discussion, so I appreciate it. And everyone out there who attended this webinar today, thank you for being here. You are going to get an email if you'd like to revisit this broadcast. You'll be able to do that. But for now, we're going to sign off. Enjoy your afternoon.
Thank you, Emily, and thank you, Dr. Glover.
Oh, and thank you. Nice meeting you, Noah.